If you enjoy our podcast, please like and subscribe and consider becoming a digital subscriber to the Albuquerque Journal to help us bring you more content like this. You can find this episode and all of our podcasts on the Albuquerque Journal website, abqjournal.com, as well as YouTube, iTunes, and Spotify. See the show notes for a discount code on a digital subscription. Thank you for supporting the Albuquerque Journal, New Mexico's leading news.
Hey everyone, welcome to the latest edition of the Business Outlook podcast. I'm your host, Kylie Garcia, retail and real estate reporter at the Journal. I'd like to start off by thanking our sponsor, C&M. Today on the show, I've got Tavis Malcolm, founder of the sleeping bag company Morrison Outdoors, which made a recent appearance on ABC's Shark Tank. We talk about his experience on the show, the future of his company in Albuquerque, and the outdoor initiatives he's got going on. So enjoy the show.
C&M is truly one college with infinite possibilities in tech and data sciences. C&M offers programs where everyone can learn about software, apps, or how to build websites. You can also choose from AI programs and machine learning, the Internet of Things, and so much more. C&M, one college, infinite possibilities, and a proud sponsor of the Albuquerque Journal's Business Outlook.
I'm joined today by Tavis Malcolm, founder and CEO of Morrison Outdoors. Tavis, welcome, and thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.
So, Tavis, before we get into Morrison Outdoors and the recent, television debut, take a moment to introduce yourself to our viewers. Where are you from, and how did you end up in Albuquerque?
Yeah, so I actually grew up in Washington State, up in the Seattle area originally. My wife's from Albuquerque. She went to Valley High. Everybody wants to know where she went to high school. She went to Valley. But we've been here for the last several years.
Yeah, and she's a nurse? Right?
She's a nurse, that's right, at Presbyterian downtown.
Nice. And so for those who don't know, what is Morrison Outdoors and how did the idea for the company come about?
Yeah, Morrison Outdoors makes award-winning sleeping bags for babies and children starting at 6 months up to 6 years old. The idea came from just wanting to go camping with my son. Morrison's my son. He's 7 now, but when he was a baby, I actually just got a Facebook notification. It was exactly 7 years ago today that we went camping for the first time when he was a baby. He was like 10 or 12 weeks old. And I just couldn't find a sleeping bag that was warm enough for camping and also safe for a baby to wear. And it just didn't make sense to me. It's kind of like, okay, why don't we make something that's cut like a baby sleep sack so that it's safe. They're not going to go inside of it and suffocate or anything like that, like a big sleeping bag, but also warm and comfortable to wear. And so I just took 2 down throw blankets from Costco and I stitched them together into the shape of a sleep sack like you used at home. I put a zipper on the front and we took it backpacking. And I just thought, man, this is great. This is exactly what I was looking for. I don't know why this doesn't exist already, but I'm just going to put this on Kickstarter kind of out of my garage and see if anybody's into the idea, And so we launched that first campaign. I think my budget was something like $2,000, $2,500. But we launched that first campaign with a goal of getting $10,000 in pre-orders, and we ended up getting $16,000 just from that Kickstarter.
Wow, that's so cool. And your wife, she kind of helped in the early stages of, the safety and sleep aspects, and then, now the product is fully, meets all of those standards and requirements for safe sleeping, right?
That's exactly right. Yeah, I mean, she was a big help in the early stages of sort of defining how it needed to function. And now we work with, professional safety consultants to go over our designs and make small suggestions, right? Like we don't use a typical zipper loop on our sleep sacks because we found out that kids would sometimes put their feet up in their mouth and then the zippers would go in their mouth and they would actually pull their teeth out that way.
Oh, wow.
So we use like a solid zipper pull so that they can't do that.
Mm-hmm.
So little things like that I think make for a good experience.
Yeah. And so today you're in stores such as REI and selling, across locations in the U.S. and Canada. Did you ever envision that starting a company someday would be a part of your future? Was that something you wanted to do growing up?
It's interesting. It wasn't something that I necessarily wanted to do, but it was something I was exposed to a lot. My parents started a business in the early 90s. I remember my dad was a tugboat captain, and he took a leave of absence in like 1992 to form a company called Real Estate Online. I mean, imagine the most primitive version of Zillow, right? Where nobody was doing real estate listings on the internet at that point. The internet was still a very novel thing, but he sort of had the foresight to say, I see the potential here, and he started that business. And, so I kind of grew up in the startup office a little bit. And that business, was interesting because it never quite caught on. I think it was a little too early as far as widespread internet adoption went. But after a couple of years, they pivoted, right? And they started another business that was all about web design and back-end infrastructure and using the tools that they had learned on the first business to now service other companies. And so it was a really great lesson in life, just that, just because things don't work out the first time doesn't mean that you can't keep moving forward, right? Failure doesn't mean finished. It just means something else.
Yeah, that's awesome. And so, all of that led you to this point where your company made an appearance on ABC Shark Tank, which, for those of you who don't know, it's a famous group of investors that, they invest in companies. The companies come on, pitch their company. So how did that opportunity come about?
It's interesting. People have been telling me from the beginning, you should put this on Shark Tank, and I always kind of laughed it off and was like, yeah, maybe someday. And I think last summer, I was actually on vacation last summer, and I just said, you know what? I should be on Shark Tank. I'm going to apply and just see what happens. And it was a little bit funny because the applications were due, like the deadline for that season was like a week after I had reached out to ask about applying, and they're long applications. I mean, like literally hundreds of pages of application info and a video that you need to submit. And so we ended up shooting the video. I got back from vacation, shot the video the next day, and submitted it like that afternoon at the deadline. And they just sort of kept moving me forward until eventually they put me on.
Yeah. And so tell me about how you prepared for the show and what it was like when you finally walked into the tank. What was that whole preparation process? And then finally being there, what was that like?
Yeah, I mean, to prepare, I really just watched like a really sickening amount of Shark Tank. I got to the point where I was like, I never want to see the show again. But we took notes on all of the questions that you see getting asked, over and over again. And we really took time to like type out the answers and practice my answers as far as the talking points that I wanted to touch on. And one of the tricky things is that when you're on the show, you've rehearsed all these answers, but you don't get to finish them. You get halfway through and another shark is coming at you with a different question on a different topic. And you're thinking to yourself, okay, I got to circle back and make sure that I mention that and get to this. And it's a lot to juggle, but actually being there on set is really surreal. It's exactly like you see on the show. You're standing behind those doors and they swing open and you're walking down the long hallway and there's the 5 sharks in front of you and you really don't see anything else. I expected to see cameras and producers and stuff around, but they're all hidden. So it feels very intimate where you're just there with the 5 sharks in front of you. And it's nerve-wracking at first, of course, but eventually you kind of settle into a rhythm. And thankfully, I've been doing this long enough that there's nothing they're going to ask me about the business that I don't know at this point. I didn't feel like I was going to get caught off guard by anything.
Yeah. I have to know, whenever you were walking down the hallway, do you hear the music? Do they play the dun, 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 dun?
They actually do not play the music, which I think is worse. It's just quiet.
Oh my gosh.
And the sharks are, Mr. Wonderful's kind of giving you his like mean guy stare down, and you're just walking in there going, oh boy, what did I get into?
And were there any sharks that you were particularly excited to meet or just excited to maybe hopeful to do a deal with?
I mean, all the sharks are great. They're all brilliant business people and I think wonderful individual people. Mark Cuban, of course, I think is kind of everybody's favorite. He's the one that you think, oh, I'd love to work with Mark Cuban, but I kind of thought, well, I'm not really in his wheelhouse, right? Like he's more of the tech guy. He does a lot of those kind of businesses, and so I didn't really expect that he would be interested.
Yeah. For those who don't know, I am a major Shark Tank fan, so I know everything about the show. So on the show, you did end up getting a deal with not one, but 2 sharks,
yes.
Mark Cuban and Barbara Corcoran.
Yeah.
Corcoran. And so the deal that was reached was $300,000 investment from them in exchange for 20% of the company, right?
That's correct.
And so as Shark Tank fans know, due diligence has to be done after, the on-camera deal is established. And sometimes, that results in deals falling through, which a lot of the deals actually do. And you told the Journal that was the case with your deal. How long were those conversations had before the deal fell through? And despite that result, how do you look back on your time with Shark Tank, and is there anything you take away from the experience?
Yeah, I can't go into a lot of detail about the experience. If you've ever been in due diligence, I mean, you might imagine the sharks want to take a look at every aspect of your business, and it's not as though there's any like big skeleton in our closet, and nothing like that. I just think that they really take time to think about it. It took maybe 4 or 5 months of conversations, ongoing. And I think that they really should take more than half an hour to think about an investment before they commit to it, So I was no hard feelings there. Just being on the show was such an awesome experience. I mean, it's a once in a lifetime thing. It's given us a lot of great press, which has been great. And, it's something that I think I'll always cherish.
Yeah, that's awesome. The city of Albuquerque hosted a watch party when the show actually aired, and I was there and people were cheering, whistling, clapping. How did it hear to hear that and receive that support in that moment?
I mean, it's just been unbelievable, honestly. I think being in Albuquerque for this moment has been really special. Like I said, I'm from Seattle. Like, this wouldn't be news in Seattle, right? Like, being here and having that community support has just been, it's been everything. It's the best part of all of this. And it's kind of unexpected. I didn't really expect to like get on the news or, have this big watch party. But yeah, I mean, having people cheering and clapping for you up on the big screen is, it's a really special feeling.
Mm-hmm. Your kids were there. They were wearing the most adorable little shark outfits.
Yeah.
So it's been a few weeks since the episode aired. Have you noticed any impact from appearing on the show, or people locally recognizing you? What's been happening since then?
So I spent all last week at a trade show in Las Vegas. And I actually had 4 or 5 people say, "Hey, I just saw you on Shark Tank."
Wow.
Which was like really cool. Like I definitely didn't expect that. And the reaction's been great. I mean, business wise, we got a nice bump in sales that weekend. What's interesting is our primary products are for kids and babies, and we really didn't see a very big increase in sales on those. I think because most people with little kids are like putting them to bed at 8:00 at night. They're not up watching Shark Tank. But our adult sleeping bags like sold out. We had a huge run on those right after the show. And so now we're looking at ways to kind of revamp those and re-release them next winter now that we've seen a lot of interest there.
Mm-hmm. And on the show, you talked about how kind of maybe a vision was for the adult side, taking them to arenas, especially for rainy games.
Yes. They're really great for like watching a cold weather sporting event. I took one to a Washington Husky football game where it was like 35 to 38 degrees, something like that. And it's just an awesome experience, just being warm and cozy in your big sleeping bag, but you can still clap and stand up and do all the things you want to do. And so maybe we can explore licensing deals in the future. I have a meeting with QVC next week to kind of talk about those. And so I think there's a lot of potential there that we just haven't tapped into.
Yeah, that's awesome. At the watch party, it was raining, and I was like, wow, I really wish I could use one of those right now. So looking forward, last we spoke, you mentioned that you were planning to move warehousing from California to Albuquerque. Mm-hmm. Where are you at in that process? Do you have any updates on that?
Yeah, I actually met with some warehouse owners just yesterday about leasing out a 5,000 square foot facility. And I think the vision now is not just to do our own warehousing and fulfillment, but to actually open a 3PL where we're doing warehousing and fulfillment for other brands our size.
Oh, yeah.
So this is my entrepreneurial brain spinning around going, wait a second, why am I making this an expense? I should make this an income stream. And I actually think this business has the potential to be as big or bigger than Morrison Outdoors in the long run. Mm-hmm. But it's still in the early planning stages, but we have a container coming in early August. And so our goal is to be operational that month.
Awesome. And so kind of continuing in the vein of establishing roots in New Mexico, you recently became vice chair of Endeavor, New Mexico, right?
That's right.
And that's a nonprofit and business alliance supporting the state's outdoor recreation businesses. Tell me, what does your work and role with Endeavor entail, and what is your vision for growing the outdoor rec industry in New Mexico?
Yeah, so Endeavor is kind of in a precarious place right now. It started maybe 4 or 5 years ago, but the original executive director and founder stepped down about 1.5 years ago, and it had sort of been languishing all through last year. And Even though I was on the board, there weren't really any meetings happening or anything like that. And sort of early this year, I'd been having conversations with the state outdoor rec department and the city of Albuquerque's economic development department. And they both kind of said, hey, are you with Endeavor? Do you know what's going on there? And so in the last 4 or 5 months, we've really sort of kicked things up, like we've reorganized the board. We have really great people involved at the board, and we're about to do another push to actually get members back into Endeavor. Because the long-term vision is to sort of bridge the gap between the state's disparate outdoor rec businesses and those decision makers at the city and state level, right? Because we're lucky that we have an outdoor rec division and we have economic developers who want to support outdoor recreation in New Mexico, and they don't know how. Mm-hmm. And so that's Endeavor's role, is to be that voice and to be in touch with all of these different types of businesses, whether you're a retailer, a manufacturer, or a fly fishing guide, or what have you, where we can advocate on their behalf and say, listen, this is what would be most helpful to help grow this industry in the state, which someone told me this week was on par with agriculture as far as state GDP. Mm-hmm. So I think it really is a big industry here in the state that we can do a lot to help support those businesses and also encourage new ones. I think New Mexico could very easily be the best place to open and run an outdoor recreation business. It wouldn't take a lot in terms of funding or programming from the cities and states. Yeah,
that makes sense. And so your company also supports a number of charities, being a part of the 1% movement.
Pledge 1%, that's 1%. Right. So we give 1% of all sales to charitable causes.
And one of those is Nature Niños, a local nonprofit that works to get kids outdoors. Why do you believe it's important to get outdoors, and in what ways has getting outdoors been helpful for you personally?
Oh man, I'm an Eagle Scout, right? Like I grew up camping and hiking. I think it's really just the best thing you can do. And if you look at the sort of statistics for how much time kids spend, outdoors versus on screens or watching TV or whatever, it's kind of nauseating, honestly. I think that it's this really sort of destructive tendency we have in our society today. And the more that we can sort of push kids out the door to sort of unlock their imaginations and expand that creative thinking is really critical for, I know this sounds a little dramatic, but I honestly think it's extremely critical for our future as a society. Being outside, it lets you think in ways that you can't do when you're locked into a phone.
Yeah, that I can completely relate to that. My safe place is the mountains for sure. I just love, especially during a stressful week, it's always great to get outdoors. And so last we spoke, you said that your family's been enjoying, the Taos Gorge, the White Sands. What's a spot in New Mexico that you kind of are hoping to hit next that you haven't yet?
That we haven't hit? That's interesting. Well, you and I actually talked a little bit about El Malpai over near Grants, right? I think that's one of those situations where, people talk about Carlsbad Caverns and the bats and everything, but it's far a drive from Albuquerque. But I think that from what I understand, there's kind of a similar experience here a lot closer. And so we definitely want to go check that out soon.
Yeah, I would definitely recommend El Malpai, ice caves, all of that. Okay, well, Tavis, that's all the questions I have for you today. So thanks so much for coming on. It's been great talking to you.
Oh, thanks for having me. Thank you for having me. My one flub right at the end.